Okay, so for the water movement portion and being with psoas, we're going to do a supine practice. So you may not be able to see me very well in the video. I'm going to organize this so it's lower to the ground, but I want you to keep in mind this word being. Being rather than doing. There is action, of course, especially when we are initializing this new proprioceptive experience, these new neural synapses. And I'm not just trying to use big words. This is really what's happening. We're reprogramming, rewiring our nervous system. What is going to engage first? Are we more closely and confidently oriented to a sense of being or a need to flee, a need to fight, a need to self-protect? Excuse me. So if you would please join me on your back. You don't need any props for this, although if you want a pillow under your head or maybe a folded blanket under your head so that there's no strain in your neck, I would definitely recommend that. Let me just move this down. First things first. Hi everybody. This is just if you need me. You might not. And you'll have the lovely view of my pelvis. Here we go. And that's how you know you're pregnant, when it just stays pooched. Okay. So come to a constructive rest position, and that means both feet are on the floor flat, your knees are bent, and stand your feet a little wider than hips width distance. Bring your knees together to touch. They may not touch in a heavy way, but they're just, the weight of your thighs is angling in. Your hands can rest over the hip sockets or come to the floor. I'm already noticing there's a bit of a pulling up and away from the floor on my left side, almost like hesitation. So start to track patterns of behavior, starting with your feet. Feel for relatively even weight. Now the position of your legs and your feet might make it so that the insteps feel a little bit heavier, but you get my meaning. Relatively balanced weight across the surface area of your feet, as well as now tracing up through the lines of the legs. Relatively even release through the thighs and the hips. We're just going to rest here for a few breaths. So where we are now with the pelvis is a fairly closed position. The back of the pelvis is wider. The pubic symphysis is pretty closed. There's, a fair amount of pressure on that joint. The knees are resting against one another. And what hopefully you're feeling is a softness through psoas rather than like a grip. It's not an adduction, a muscular pulling the legs together. They're just resting. Open the knees and restore your feet to hips width distance apart. And I invite you to visualize your sacrum, that triangular, downward pointed triangle bone at the base of your spine, creating the back of the pelvis. And there's little seams there. Your sacrum is its own bone, and then there are the two halves of your pelvis. You know this now. As you breathe, I invite you to imagine that those two seams on either side of your sacrum are actually moving in and pressing up. The very top of the sacrum might peel away from the floor. The downward point of the sacrum might start to press into the floor. And then with exhale, press a little with your feet to flatten out. And no need to tuck your tail. Don't use your abdominals as much as possible. Inhale. Open up the sitting bones as they peel away from one another. The back of the sacrum peels up off the ground, and then exhale, come to flat. And we'll just do this a few times. A pelvic tilt. Inhale. Bring the base of your pelvis closer to the ground. Exhale. Press the top of your pelvis closer to the ground. Just trying to come up with multiple ways of saying it so that you find your way. And then come to center, neutral. There's not an active attempt to press in any direction. And imagine the two halves of your pelvis now. Notice if there's a felt sense of equal weight, like your thigh bones were sinking evenly into those sockets. And then I invite you, as you inhale, to just rest your fingertips over your hip sockets. With your inhale, imagine the two halves of your pelvis moving away from one another. And on exhale, draw them towards one another. This is not technically a pelvic tilt, although you might feel a little bit of that movement. Also, catch yourself if you happen to be moving your thigh bones in an attempt to make this more visceral than it is at present. It might not be that you have a ton of sensitivity for this just yet. Inhale, pelvis expands laterally. Exhale, it draws towards center, but there's no tightening. And some of you may start to feel the pelvic floor muscles pulse here. That's great. Engage that as softly as possible. So on inhale, there is a sense of deepening and widening. And on exhale, a drawing towards center. But again, it's not a tightening or a pulling up per se. Something that I sense, which may be useful to you, it's almost like the whole base of my pelvis, the bones surrounding the perineum, the vulva. On inhale, they open. And for me, this image works. It's like a dinosaur's mouth opening. I don't know why. And on exhale, it closes. So if you don't like that image, get rid of it. Maybe it's something more lovely, like a shell opening and there's a beautiful pearl inside. I like that one better too. Although sometimes I do feel like a dinosaur, so whatever your mood. And now we're going to add a little more movement, and we're moving away from gravity. So here's where it gets interesting, and I encourage you to work as subtly as possible. Let it be as subtle as possible. Step your heels just slightly closer to your knees. And by doing this, we're really ensuring that there is the use of the full foot, and also the shin bone can act really as a lever so the soft tissue of psoas can release a bit. We're working with the whole back body release here. Turn your palms down to face the floor. Resist the temptation to do that yoga thing where you squeeze your shoulder blades together and push your boobs out. Keep your back ribs flat to the floor for now. And as you inhale, let your consciousness descend into the pelvis and expand like the pelvic floor. On exhale, give weight just to your feet. See if you can do that without clenching butt cheeks. And any amount, hover your sacrum off the floor. Try not to lift it up through clench or even just, go right and pick it up off the floor. Just sink your feet until the sacrum lifts and then set it back down with inhale. Exhale, weight to the feet. Press straight down through shin bones. Maybe add a little press with the backs of your arms and palms. That clamshell image is really helping me here. And release down. One more time. See if you can lift without tucking, without clenching. It's almost impossible. Come on down and just let your legs slide out and relax a bit. I'm going to give my legs a little shake. Going to do that one more time. And this is about a couple of things. We're strengthening the pelvic floor in a sustainable way. We're strengthening the pelvic floor without concerning ourselves, wasting energy, or perhaps creating imbalanced strength in hip flexors and abdominals, the surface level abdominals especially, which is what we typically prioritize in our fitness. Or there's just a sense of do as many reps as you can, and if it's hard and making you sweat bullets, then it's going to be useful to you. Let's debunk that myth, shall we? Nothing wrong with sweating, but let's just know what we're doing. Bring your feet together now, the inner edges of your feet, along with your knees, and have your heels close enough to your butt that you really feel your feet able to press down. Now, relax the pelvis. Relax between your shoulder blades, spread your fingers wide, and press your palms into the floor. In order for me to do that, I've got to have my hands a little bit away from my hips and elbows very slightly bent out to the side. Keep upper back wide. Inhale, imagine the whole pelvis expanding, becoming a larger bowl. And on exhale, press through the inner edges of your feet in particular. And press through the inner edges of your arms all the way down to your thumb. See if you can lift your pelvis without clenching your butt, your low back, or forcing your hips high. Really, it's just a hover. And inhale, come on down. Exhale. You can think about pressing your knees away from you. Try not to do it with your face or your chest. Come back down. We'll do this one more time and then we're adding on. Good. And then lift your left foot off the floor. You don't need to pull it to your chest with your hand. Just let it kind of hang out there. It's my belly starting to get in the way. My knee is going to angle out more than yours probably needs to. Take a long, slow, deep breath in. Descend into the pelvic floor as you exhale, just with the strength of the right leg. Press straight through the earth. Use both arms to support, possibly hovering the pelvis off the ground without letting the left half dip. So you're doing a little extra strength training on that left side. And inhale, release. We'll do this 2 more times. You can do as many repetitions as you like when you do this on your own. Try to keep it out of the face. Keep it out of that clench mode. Again, you start to unravel the stories. You start to identify where there's work to be done. There's work to be done for me in not working so hard. Everything is max effort all the time. I can feel it. And no wonder I have back pain. No wonder I have a fairly shot nervous system and volatile emotions when I'm not doing my work. Inhale. Change sides. Draw the right knee in toward your chest. Take another long, slow, deep breath in here. And as you exhale, root straight through the left foot. Make sure the instep of the foot stays weighted. Use your arms. Keep the right half of the pelvis in line with your left. And inhale. Set it down, or maybe just let it get heavy again. Exhale. Clamshell in the pelvis. One more time. And come on down. Please release your legs. Supta Baddha Konasana might feel nice for some of you. That's a reclined butterfly. If it feels like too much or legs out straight is more appealing, do that by all means. We have one more piece on the floor, and then we'll move to standing. One more piece in this section, and then you can even take a break if you like. So roll onto your side. It doesn't matter which one because you'll do both. Prop your head up in your hand and bring your knees forward, almost to hip height, but not quite. Knees at a diagonal down from your hip sockets. Press the inner edges of your feet together and flex your ankles. Slightly allow the tailbone to move back. It's really that genitals back. Soften and widen between your sitting bones. There's no grip in my low back as I do this. Now, without really choreographing the movement to your breath, 15 times we're going to do side clams. So with this slight extension in my spine, genitals back, sits bones wide apart, I can't open my leg very far. It limits my range of motion. That's the point. It's going to target more specifically your glute medius muscle, and this is what holds your pelvis stable in space. When your pelvis is stable in space, your spine is more likely to be stable in space. Your breath is more likely to stabilize in space. There's an orientation of head, heart, and root. All those things I think are pretty self-explanatory on why they're beneficial, so I'm not going to go into it further. 15 times. Little clam. Keep the sits bones moving away from one another. Keep the genitals pointing back. Keep your low back relaxed. Another thing I'm finding myself needing to do is with my top hand, keep this top hip from collapsing into my armpit. So I'm just lengthening the side of my waist a bit here. I've totally lost count. I'm going to do 6 more. Maybe one more. These feel really good to me, and I feel great when I stand up. Let's flip around. You don't need to, kill a good thing until you hate it, so 15 is plenty for these. And be really, really mindful about what you're sensing in your low back, the sacroiliac joint, that seam where your sacrum joins, the ilium, the side bones of your pelvis. Just be mindful of really pushing here, pushing for the repetition, pushing through odd sensation. Remember, the objective is being. There's nothing you have to do to get a better ass. It's not gonna, I don't know. What do we think it's gonna get us? I was gonna say get into heaven, but that's my little Catholic schoolgirl coming out. That seemed really important. I've started my reps. I'm counting. Feeling a little tension here on my left side, so I'm not going to push it quite so much on the range of motion. And if you are watching, you can see me. I'm rolling back. Track that for yourself. Keep your hips stacked vertically. Have to make sure my opposite butt cheek doesn't tuck under. And I am widening through both sits bones, not just the top one. It's a really small range of motion. Notice that? This is 2. One more. Come up to hands and knees. Place your palms underneath your shoulders. Let me turn around so the mic is better positioned. Knees under hips. And I just want you to let your whole torso sag. So my shoulder blades are moving towards one another. I'm not emphasizing the spinal tilt or the pelvic tilt. I'm just giving weight to the front of my body. Shoulder blades are slightly pinching towards one another. I'm going to let my head hang. I sense some stretch in my traps. Press firmly through the inner edges of your hands, especially if you hyperextend your elbows, if they look like they go past 180. Bend them a little bit and almost try to stretch the floor apart with your hands. Take another slow breath here. Remember, you're not emphasizing the curve in your back. You're just letting the ribs hang. And then either child's pose or cat pose. I'm going to tuck my toes under for this cat. Push through your hands. Spread your shoulder blades wide. Don't clench your belly. Don't pull your belly button up tight. Rather, just press with your toes. Let your butt hang, your tail hang. Press with your hands. And move into that thoracic spinal curve. And take a seat, which could also look like kneeling. Rest your hands over your knees or bring your hands to prayer in front of your chest. Close your eyes. Simple centering. Feel for your root making contact with the earth. Pubic bone and tailbone anchor down evenly. Sits bones anchor down evenly. And in the soft center of that root plummeting into earth, begin to engage a more deliberate breath. Inhale as an opening to nourishment. Exhale, draw the nourishment deep into your body. Maybe it's into your belly. Maybe it's into your heart. Maybe it's all the way up into your mind. You can stay here as long as you like.